At 8:42 a.m. local time, somewhere in the Caribbean Sea, the radar picture looks ordinary. Most of the contacts are exactly what the crew expects to see. Distant merchant traffic and slow vessels moving along familiar routes. Nothing stands out. Nothing feels urgent. Then the screen changes. Almost at once, 8 new surface contacts appear. They do not show up gradually or at random. They emerge together, spaced in a way that suggests planning rather than chance. The radar operator freezes for a beat, then zooms in. Each contact is holding a steady course. No AIS. No identification signal. No sign of commercial activity. 8 vessels, completely silent. The officer of the deck leans toward the console. In these waters, fishing boats are normal. Coast Guard traffic is normal. But 8 vessels appearing at the same time with no electronic signature is something very different. It is not a clear threat yet, but it is serious enough to demand immediate attention. Mark and track. Comes the calm order. By 8:44 a.m., the contacts are assessed as military-type hulls based on their speed, spacing, and radar return. They are not large frontline ships, but they are clearly not civilian either. Their outlines resemble patrol-class vessels. The formation is loose but not random. It looks disciplined, deliberate, rehearsed. Outside, the sea still looks almost too calm. No smoke, no sharp turns, no obvious display of force. From a distance, it would seem like nothing more than a U.S. Navy ship continuing through international waters under a bright, peaceful sky. Inside the ship, the atmosphere changes. Not panic, precision. At 8:46 a.m., long-range optics come online. The camera feed confirms the radar picture. Gray hulls, hard naval lines, military paint, Venezuelan naval vessels, 8 in total, spread wide and approaching from different bearings, steadily closing the distance. No radio call, no warning, no acknowledgement. That silence matters. At sea, standard procedure is simple. When military ships encounter one another, there is usually some kind of communication. A hail, a signal, an attempt to make intentions clear. Silence leaves everything open to interpretation. And at sea, misinterpretation is where serious problems begin. At 8:48 a.m., the first hail is sent over open channels. No answer. A second hail follows shortly after, delivered clearly, professionally, and without any hostile tone. Still nothing. The 8 Venezuelan vessels continue on course. Their speed is controlled and consistent. They are not rushing in, but they are not wandering either. They are moving with intent, and with every mile they close, the geometry of the encounter becomes tighter. Inside the Combat Information Center, analysts begin calculating closest points of approach. If nothing changes, several of the contacts will pass well inside normal safety margins. Close enough to apply pressure, close enough to test the response. This does not look accidental. At 8:51 a.m., one of the Venezuelan ships makes a subtle heading change. Only a few degrees. Barely noticeable to the eye, but obvious on radar. That small adjustment puts it on a more direct intercept line with the projected track of the U.S. ship. It is the first move that cannot be dismissed. Not sharp enough to justify escalation. Not harmless enough to ignore. The captain receives a brief, stripped down to facts. 8 ships, no AIS, no reply to repeated hails. One vessel edging closer. Every action is logged. Cameras are recording. Rules of engagement remain unchanged. Maintain course, the captain orders. Continue documentation. The ship does not turn away. It does not accelerate. It does not reduce speed. Professional restraint is not hesitation. It is discipline. And out here, discipline is its own form of strength. By 8:55 a.m., the Venezuelan formation becomes unmistakable. These vessels are no longer simply closing in. They are positioning. The angles sharpen. The spacing begins to make sense. What first looked scattered is now resolving into a coordinated pattern. An encirclement does not have to be complete to send a signal. It only has to feel close enough. No shots are fired, no alarms are blaring. But the stillness of the Caribbean no longer feels calm. Something has begun out here at 8:42 a.m., and whatever message was intended when those 8 contacts appeared on radar, the next decisions will determine how far this encounter goes. By 9:03 a.m., the pattern is impossible to dismiss. What started as 8 distant returns on a radar screen has become a moving formation with clear purpose. The Venezuelan vessels are no longer holding parallel tracks. One after another, they make slight heading corrections, small, measured, deliberate. But taken together, the meaning is obvious. The U.S. Navy ship now sits at the center of a tightening shape. Not fully boxed in, not yet, but under clear pressure. On the radar display, the contacts spread into a broad arc. 2 vessels shift off the starboard side, keeping a steady interval. 3 more settle off the port quarter. The remaining ships stay farther back, giving the formation depth and flexibility. It is a classic pressure posture, designed to limit freedom of movement without openly crossing into direct confrontation. At sea, distance speaks, and right now that message is getting louder. On the bridge, the crew tracks every change in bearing. Every fraction of a knot is recorded. Closest point of approach estimates update in real time, and the numbers are moving in the wrong direction. If nobody changes course, at least 2 Venezuelan vessels will pass within 2 nautical miles. Close enough that intent begins to matter more than procedure. At 9:06 a.m., another hail is transmitted. Calm, clear, professional. No response. By now, the silence feels deliberate. Long-range cameras zoom in again. The image sharpens further. Crew members can be seen on several Venezuelan ships. Helmets on. Personnel gathered near the rails and forward sections. No weapons are visibly being operated, but the posture is unmistakable. Alert, prepared, watching. Inside the Combat Information Center, analysts quietly record every detail. This is not a routine crossing between patrols. The formation is too exact. The spacing is too consistent. The crews are too controlled. These ships know exactly where they are, and they know exactly who they are approaching. At 9:09 a.m., something small changes, but it carries weight. One of the Venezuelan ships increases speed by just 2 knots. On its own, it's nothing unusual. But in this moment, it means something. The vessel begins to pull slightly ahead of the others, closing the distance along the projected path of the U.S. Navy ship. The space tightens. Still, the U.S. ship does not react. Changing course now could be misread. Slowing down might look uncertain. Speeding up could raise the stakes. In this situation, the most controlled move is also the simplest one. Hold course. Hold speed. The captain repeats the order. This isn't inaction. It's deliberate control. By 9:12 a.m., the situation evolves again. Electronic sensors pick up the first active signal. One of the Venezuelan ships switches on a low-power surface search radar. It's not a targeting system. It's not an immediate danger. But it marks a clear shift. This is no longer passive observation. They are now actively scanning. Every detail is captured. Frequencies logged. Signal strength measured. Duration recorded. Nothing dramatic on its own, but together it builds a clearer picture. This is controlled pressure, carefully kept just below the line. From the bridge wing, binoculars confirm what the sensors already suggest. The ships are close enough now to see clearly. Hull numbers, flags moving in the wind. There's no confusion about identity, no uncertainty about jurisdiction. Both sides know exactly who they're facing. At 9:15 a.m., the formation settles into place. 8 ships arranged in a loose semicircle, all within visual range. No one crosses directly ahead. No one cuts across the bow. Every movement feels measured, pressure, without direct provocation. This is the gray zone. The captain receives an updated report. Multiple vessels inside 2 nautical miles. Coordinated movement, no direct hostile actions, but clear intent to limit maneuvering space. The rules of engagement remain unchanged. The choice is straightforward and difficult. Escalate and risk turning tension into confrontation. Pull away and reward the pressure, or hold steady and force the other side to decide what comes next. The U.S. Navy ship holds steady. By 9:18 a.m., a clear line has been drawn. 8 Venezuelan ships have approached that line, tested it, but not crossed it. The formation remains in place, the silence continues, and whatever happens next will be a decision, not an accident. At 9:21 a.m., the tone shifts again. 2 Venezuelan ships begin to accelerate. Slowly at first, 3 knots, then 4, but clearly intentional. At the same time, their headings adjust, narrowing toward the bow of the U.S. ship. This is no longer just presence. It is controlled pressure becoming something more. Inside the Combat Information Center, the numbers update again, and this time, they raise concern. 1 vessel is now projected to pass within 1 nautical mile if nothing changes. That distance matters. At sea, 1 nautical mile is not a collision risk, but it is close enough to force decisions. Close enough that every move carries meaning. At 9:23 a.m., another hail is transmitted. Calm, firm, repeated in both English and Spanish. The wording is precise, leaving no room for confusion about position or expectations. There is still no reply. Instead, 1 Venezuelan ship shifts its heading again, just a few degrees, placing itself even closer to the U.S. Ship's projected path. The move is smooth and clearly intentional. It's designed to draw a response, without triggering one. On the bridge, the crew watches quietly as the geometry tightens. Log the maneuver, the captain says. Continue recording. By 9:25 a.m., sensors pick up another active radar signal. A second Venezuelan vessel briefly scans the area with low-power pulses. Still not a targeting action, but no longer neutral either. They are testing limits. Electronic warfare specialists capture everything. Frequencies, timing, patterns. Every signal is stored. At this point, it's not just monitoring the situation, it's documenting it. On the horizon, the ships are now close enough to see individual movement on deck. Crew members reposition. On one vessel, a small group gathers near a forward-mounted gun. The weapon isn't in use, but the visual message is clear. Presence, pressure, intent, without open escalation. At 9:27 a.m., the captain calls senior watch officers to the bridge. The situation is laid out clearly. 8 ships, 2 maneuvering more assertively, multiple active radar signals, no communication, no direct threat actions. The rules still stand. No hostile act, no justification for force, but also no requirement to give way. Prepare aviation option, the captain says. The order moves through the ship quietly, but with purpose. Below deck, the flight crew begins their work with calm precision. There's no alarm, no urgency. This isn't a reaction. It's a signal, a visible step that can be observed, recorded, and understood without crossing the line. At 9:30 a.m., the Venezuelan ship closest to the bow increases speed again. The projected distance drops further, now under 1 nautical mile. Its wake stretches behind it, cutting a sharp white line across the water. The message is clear. Inside the Combat Information Center, one voice breaks the silence. Contact maneuvering with intent. That phrase carries weight. It doesn't declare a threat, but it marks the edge of escalation. On the bridge, the captain watches through binoculars. No raised voice, no sudden commands, just a final pause, giving the other side one last moment to reconsider. They don't. At 9:32 a.m., the decision is made. Launch the helicopter. The order is steady, controlled. This was the moment that defined the standoff. Not a weapon, not an outright threat, but a presence too clear to dismiss. As the ship continues on the same course at the same speed, the flight deck comes to life. Rotor blades begin to turn, and their sound cuts through the still Caribbean air, rolling across the water toward the Venezuelan formation. For the first time since 8:42 a.m., the silence is broken. Not by radio traffic, but by a signal no one can misunderstand. The encounter has moved beyond silent pressure. Now it is open signaling. And the next move comes from the air. At 9:34 a.m., the helicopter lifts off the deck. Its rotors slice through the calm air, sending ripples across the sea below. The sound travels far, farther than any hail over the radio, and every vessel in the Venezuelan formation hears it. This is not a rushed launch. There is no confusion on deck, no frantic motion in the crew's actions. Everything is measured, disciplined, and unmistakably deliberate. The aircraft climbs to a low operational altitude and pushes forward, angling toward the tightening curve of Venezuelan warships. From the bridge, the captain watches in silence. The ship itself does not change course. Speed remains constant. Nothing about the U.S. vessel suggests uncertainty or retreat. The message is simple and unmistakable. We are not the ones changing the situation. You are. At 9:36 a.m., the helicopter crosses the forward edge of the Venezuelan formation. It does not fly directly overhead or make any aggressive move. Instead, it passes offset, far enough to avoid unnecessary provocation, close enough to demand attention. Its sensors are already active. Electro-optical systems zoom in and stabilize on hull numbers, bridge positions, deck crews, and visible activity. Everything is being recorded. Inside the aircraft, the crew works with quiet precision. The pilot holds a steady path. The sensor operator calls out bearings and distances. Video feeds stream back to the ship in real time, complete with timestamps and geographic references. This is not theater. It is documentation. At 9:38 a.m., the helicopter slows and settles into a controlled orbit near the Venezuelan vessel that had behaved most aggressively. The one that had closed inside a mile, the one that made the first deliberate heading change. From this angle, the difference in posture is impossible to miss. On the Venezuelan deck, sailors look up. Some raise hands to shield their eyes from the sun. Others point. A few move back toward the superstructure. The aircraft changes the equation immediately. Ships can test distance and positioning. An aircraft removes uncertainty. A calm warning is broadcast from the helicopter. The tone is even, professional, and controlled. This is a United States Navy aircraft. You are operating unsafely in international waters. Alter course immediately. Then the message is repeated in Spanish, slowly and clearly. For the first time since the encounter began, hesitation becomes visible. At 9:41 a.m., the nearest Venezuelan ship reduces speed, not dramatically, but enough for its wake to shorten. The projected passing distance widens slightly. Another vessel farther out on the arc begins to ease back, opening the range by a fraction of a mile. They are small adjustments, but they are real. The helicopter keeps its orbit. It does not chase. It does not press directly overhead. The pressure comes from presence, not pursuit. Its cameras continue recording every reaction, every change in movement, every shift in posture. Back aboard the U.S. ship, the Combat Information Center updates the captain. Contact 1 reducing speed. Contact 3 increasing range. No further active radar emissions. The circle is starting to loosen. At 9:44 a.m., a brief radio transmission crackles through the static. Venezuelan naval call signs are heard for the first time. The traffic is not directed at the U.S. ship, but between the Venezuelan vessels themselves. Internal coordination, repositioning, adjustments. They are rethinking the situation. The helicopter widens its orbit, now visible to the full formation. Against the bright Caribbean sky, its silhouette is unmistakable. It may be unarmed in appearance, but everyone in the area understands what it represents. Not just one aircraft, but the full capability behind it. At 9:47 a.m., the Venezuelan ship furthest forward changes course. Only a few degrees, but enough to break the intercept line, enough to show that a decision has been made. Others begin to follow. The arc opens, distances grow. What moments earlier looked like a tightening ring now begins to stretch apart. No formal statement is made. No one announces a retreat, but the pattern has changed. The helicopter remains overhead until that change is undeniable. At 9:50 a.m., the aircraft turns back toward the U.S. ship. The rotors tilt. Speed increases slightly. The message has been sent and understood. From the bridge, the captain gives a single nod. The turning point has passed. No rounds are fired. No one shouts. But the direction of the encounter has changed completely, not through brute force, but through disciplined escalation. What began as pressure from the surface has now been reversed from the air, and the outcome is no longer in question. By 9:52 a.m., the balance is gone. The helicopter settles back onto the flight deck with practiced precision. The rotors slow. The deck crew secures the aircraft. From the outside, it looks ordinary. Another launch, another recovery, under clear skies. But everyone on board understands what has just happened. The momentum has shifted, and it has shifted clearly. On the radar display, the Venezuelan formation is changing shape. The arc that had pressed inward is breaking apart. One vessel opens lateral distance, another drops farther back, reducing speed below the rest. The ship that had come closest and the one that had closed inside a mile now holds a steady course that no longer threatens the U.S. ship's path. No apology comes over the radio. No explanation follows. None is needed. At sea, movement says enough. At 9:55 a.m., the captain orders one final status review. All contacts remain in the area, but their posture has changed. They are no longer constraining movement. They are simply observing, passive radar only. No additional emissions, no further turns aimed at interception. The point has been made. The U.S. Navy ship does not change course. It does not slow down. It does not accelerate to underline the moment. Instead, it continues exactly as it had before. Same heading, same speed, same disciplined posture. That is the quiet expression of control. Any change now would suggest the pressure had achieved something. It had not. From the bridge wing, the Venezuelan ships are still visible in the distance, but the gap is widening. Their wakes now angle away rather than inward. The formation is no longer acting as one coordinated shape. It is becoming what it truly is now. Individual ships making separate decisions. At 9:58 a.m., one Venezuelan vessel breaks farther south. Another turns slightly west. The others trail behind at increasing distance, keeping the U.S. ship in sight without closing in. The encirclement is finished. Inside the Combat Information Center, analysts complete the record. Timelines are finalized. Video is archived. Radar tracks are saved. Every maneuver, every signal, every heading change is preserved with time and position attached. This is more than a report. It is a complete record. Encounters like this rarely end in dramatic fashion. More often, they end in documentation. At 10:02 a.m., the captain receives the final update. No contacts are maneuvering with intent. No active sensors are detected. No safety concerns are ongoing. Maintain normal operations, he orders. That is all. No announcement, no celebration, no theatrical ending. The ship continues on, but the meaning of the encounter remains. 8 Venezuelan warships attempted to apply pressure without taking the final step. They used distance, silence, and coordinated positioning. They pushed until the boundary became clear and stopped when the response made any further move too costly. This is how modern naval confrontations often unfold. Not through explosions, but through calculation. Not through spectacle, but through restraint. What happened here was not weakness, it was control expressed with precision. The US Navy did not need to overpower the other side in dramatic fashion. It only needed to show 3 things: that it would not yield, that it would not overreact, and that it would not abandon a lawful course. That combination, discipline, patience, and visible capability, is far harder to challenge than raw force alone. As the Caribbean returns to calm, the Venezuelan ships fade into the distance, reduced to smaller radar echoes and faint wakes disappearing into open water. The encounter is over, but the lesson remains. In international waters, control does not belong to the loudest voice or the nearest hull. It belongs to the side that knows when to stay steady and when to make the other side reconsider without ever taking the final step. And this time, that is exactly what happened.